Is the king of superbikes walking blindly into a career-ending ambush? From our news desk, the headlines regarding Toprak Razgatlioglu's 2026 MotoGP entry have shifted from celebratory to deeply cautionary. For years, the Turkish phenom has enjoyed the status of an untouchable deity within the World Superbike Paddock. But as he prepares to transition to Pramac Yamaha, he is no longer the one setting the rules. Our investigation into the Paddock sentiment reveals a growing fear that Toprak is being lured into a prestige trap. This isn't just a change of scenery, it is a total abandonment of a kingdom where he held the keys to the castle. The news today isn't about his talent, which is undeniable, but about the environment he is entering. In MotoGP, the Paddock is a cold, clinical machine that does not care for the showman antics that made him a global superstar in WSBK. Experts suggest that by carrying the heavy mantle of a WSBK champion, Toprak has painted a massive bullseye on his back. Every veteran on that grid is waiting to prove that production-based racing is a secondary tier. If Toprak arrives with the assumption that his previous glory entitles him to a seat at the head of the table, the resulting ego death will be televised globally. We are witnessing a high-stakes gamble where the prize is a legacy, but the cost is total career destruction.
The narrative of the immigrant champion coming to conquer the elite is a classic tale, but in the modern era of prototype racing, these stories more often end in a quiet exit through the back door of the hospitality unit. The question for 2026 isn't whether he can ride, but whether he can survive the psychological warfare of being a small fish in a very shark-infested pond. He is leaving a world where he was the sun, to enter a galaxy where he is just another star struggling for light. Can a master of street-legal machines ever truly speak the language of a multi-million-dollar prototype? The technical divide between World Superbike and MotoGP is wider than the oceans separating the circuits. As a reporter covering the technical evolution of these machines, it's vital to understand that Toprak is essentially moving from a high-performance sports car to a fighter jet. The Yamaha V4 project he is set to join represents the pinnacle of aerospace engineering applied to two wheels. However, this is where the trouble begins. A superbike, by its very nature, has flex. It communicates with the rider. It moves. It breathes. A MotoGP prototype is a rigid, unforgiving carbon fiber skeleton that demands a specific, almost robotic input. Our technical sources indicate that Toprak's legendary stuntman style, characterized by massive endos and aggressive bike twisting, may be physically impossible to execute on a machine designed for aerodynamic downforce and centrifugal stability.
In MotoGP, if you try to muscle the bike the way Toprak does his BMW or Yamaha R1, the electronics and the chassis geometry will fight back. You don't ride a MotoGP bike, you negotiate with it. For a rider who has built his entire identity on dominating the machine, this loss of control is a recipe for disaster. We are looking at a fundamental prototype paradox, where his greatest strengths in one discipline become his most terminal weaknesses in another. The news from the testing sheds is already whispering about his struggle to adapt to the sheer stiffness of the frame. If he cannot rewire his muscle memory by the first round of 2026, he will be fighting a losing battle against a machine that simply doesn't speak his language. It is a technical wall that many have hit, but few have ever climbed. What happens when a rider's greatest weapon, his feel for the limit, is silenced by a different brand of rubber? In the world of professional racing, the tires are the only thing that matters, and for Toprak, the Michelin front tire is becoming a terrifying enigma. For his entire professional career, Toprak has leaned on the communicative soft carcass Pirelli tires of the WSBK series. Those tires allow him to brake until the very last millisecond, feeling every vibration through the bars. But the Michelin tires used in MotoGP are a completely different animal. They are stiff, they require immense heat to function, and most importantly, they offer very little warning before they let go. Our reports from the Sepang Pasok highlighted a disturbing trend. Toprak was consistently losing time in the trail braking phase, the very area where he usually destroys his competition. If he cannot master the Michelin feel, he is essentially riding blind. It's like a world-class pianist being forced to play on a keyboard where half the keys are silent. This isn't a minor adjustment, it's a sensory deprivation that strips away his confidence. Without that front-end trust, Toprak cannot attack the corners, and in MotoGP, a defensive rider is a slow rider. The news from the timing screens of the preseason tests showed him 2 seconds off the lead pace. In this league, that isn't a gap, it's an eternity. If he continues to struggle with this tire transition, the stop-and-go king will find himself stopped indefinitely at the bottom of the timesheets, unable to find the limit that once made him a god among men. The Michelin nightmare is real, and for a rider who lives on the edge of the front tire, it is the ultimate career threat. Is the mad dog of Turkey about to find out that the MotoGP paddock has no room for rabid aggression? There is a fine line between a fierce competitor and a liability, and veteran observer Mattia Pasini has already labeled Toprak a mad dog. While that intensity won him fans in the production class, it is a high-risk strategy in the elite tier. In our editorial view, this hunger is Toprak's most dangerous trait. When a rider is starving for results and finds himself in 18th place, the natural instinct is to push harder, to take more risks, and to override the bike's logic. In MotoGP, that approach leads to the medical center. The riders he is facing, Bagnaia, Martin, Marquez, are surgical. They win through efficiency, not desperation. Toprak's all-or-nothing mentality is a double-edged sword that could very well end his season before it truly begins. We've seen this script before. A talented outsider arrives, tries to shock the establishment with aggression, and ends up suffering a high-speed trauma that alters their career path forever. The news we are following isn't just about lap times, it's about the psychological pressure building inside the Pramac garage. If Toprak doesn't learn to temper his mad dog instincts with the cold-blooded patience of a prototype veteran, he won't be standing on the podium. He'll be watching from the sidelines with a cast on his arm. Humility is the only cure for the trauma Pasini predicts, but for a man who has been told he is the best for a decade, humility is a very bitter pill to swallow. This hunger could be his fuel, or it could be the fire that burns his entire house down.
Will Toprak become another casualty in the long tragic history of Superbike stars who failed the prototype test? As we look back at the archives of motorcycle racing, the path from WSBK to MotoGP is littered with the remains of once great careers. Even the legendary Jonathan Rea, a man with 6 world titles, could never find the magic in the prototype class. Our reporting suggests that Toprak is chasing a ghost that has claimed almost every victim before him. The level of specialization in 2026 is at an all-time high. The riders he will face have been groomed in the MotoGP paddock since they were 12 years old. They know the tracks, the tires, and the political games of the continental circus like the back of their hands. Toprak is a latecomer, an immigrant from a different world of racing. The World Superbike champion tag is a heavy burden because it creates an expectation of immediate success. If he doesn't deliver top 5 finishes early, the media, ourselves included, will begin to ask the hard questions. Is he just a production bike specialist? Was his success a result of a weak field in WSBK? These are the narratives that can destroy a rider's mental health. The Ghost of Jonathan Rea should serve as a chilling warning. Being the best in one world doesn't mean you belong in the next. The verdict on Toprak's career will be written in the first 6 races of 2026, and if history is any indication, the pen is held by a very cruel author.
He must prove that he is the exception to a rule that has been set in stone for decades. Is Yamaha's desperate struggle for redemption the worst possible environment for a rookie debut? One of the most critical stories we are tracking is the state of the Yamaha V4 engine project. Toprak isn't just joining a new class, he is joining a manufacturer that has been in a state of crisis. While Pramac provides him with a factory-supported seat, he is essentially becoming a high-speed test pilot for a brand that is desperately trying to catch up to Ducati's dominance. Our sources within the paddock suggest that the Yamaha is still struggling with a lack of rear-end grip and a narrow operating window. For a rookie like Toprak, who needs a stable platform to learn the intricacies of the class, this is a nightmare scenario. Instead of focusing on his riding, he will be forced to troubleshoot mechanical failures and electronic glitches. This is career suicide by proxy. Mauro Sanchini has noted that the current Yamaha requires a very specific riding style that is the polar opposite of Toprak's natural tendencies. If the bike doesn't work, Toprak will be blamed. It is a classic case of a great rider in the wrong place at the wrong time. If the Yamaha project fails to produce a competitive machine for 2026, Toprak's MotoGP career will be over before he even gets a chance to show his true potential. He is tied to a sinking ship, and in the world of top-tier racing, there are no lifeboats for those who finish outside the points. The pressure of developing a new engine while learning a new class is a burden few could carry. Can a rider who skipped the paddock schooling survive the most intense schedule in sports history? A major point of concern for our reporting team is Toprak's lack of experience within the specific Grand Prix weekend structure. Unlike the graduates of Moto3 and Moto2, Toprak didn't grow up in this product. He hasn't mastered the art of the one-lap attack under the immense pressure of a Friday afternoon session. In MotoGP, if you aren't fast in the first 30 minutes of practice 1, your entire weekend is compromised. There is no time for finding a rhythm. It is a sprint from the moment the lights turn green on Friday morning. Pasini correctly points out that Toprak's approach to the weekend is his biggest weakness. In WSBK, the atmosphere is more relaxed, with more time to adjust. In MotoGP, it is a meat grinder. If he misses the direct entry to Q2, he is buried on the grid, and in the era of sophisticated aerodynamics, passing has never been more difficult. He will be stuck in the dirty air of the mid-pack, overheating his tires and risking crashes just to move up one position. This structural shock is often what breaks non-Paddock riders.
They realize too late that the speed on the track is only 50% of the battle. The other 50% is managing the relentless, clock-driven pressure of the GP format. If he cannot adapt his mind to this frantic pace, he will be chewed up and spat out by a system that has no patience for learning on the job. The clock is a MotoGP rider's most brutal enemy, and it never stops ticking. Is the showman persona a mask for a rider who is terrified of being average? Behind the scenes, we have to ask, is Toprak's public bravado a defense mechanism? He has spent years being the king who does incredible stoppies and acrobatic overtakes for the cameras. But in the 2026 MotoGP tests, the cameras weren't catching him doing stunts. They were catching him looking at data screens with a confused expression. Our editorial team believes that Toprak's biggest enemy might be his own brand. He has sold himself as the man who would turn MotoGP upside down, but the reality of being 18th fastest is a traumatic ego hit. Pasini noted that Toprak did not take the Sepang results well. This is the arrogance trap. When you tell the world you are coming to conquer, and then you find yourself struggling to beat the satellite riders, the pressure becomes unbearable. In MotoGP, you have to be willing to be bad before you can be good. You have to be humble enough to follow other riders and learn their lines.
If Toprak's pride prevents him from being a student, he will remain a shadow of his former self. The paddock is full of riders who were once the next big thing, but couldn't handle the transition from hero to zero. For Toprak, the 2026 season is a test of character more than a test of speed. The show is over. Now begins the brutal reality of the struggle for survival in the elite class. At what point does the physical and mental toll of failure become too much for a world champion to bear? The sheer violence of a 300 horsepower MotoGP bike takes a toll that production bikes simply cannot match. Between the G-forces of the carbon brakes and the physical strength required to manhandle a bike with massive aero loads, Toprak is entering a realm of physical punishment he has never known. But as reporters, we are more concerned with the mental toll. Imagine being a national hero in Turkey, a man with millions of followers who expect a podium every Sunday, and then finding yourself struggling to finish in the points. The dark room of a struggling rider is a lonely place. We've seen many riders lose their spark after a few months of mid-pack finishes. They stop taking risks, they start blaming the bike, and eventually, they just want to go home. The transition from a winning environment to a struggling environment can be career-ending. If Toprak doesn't see progress within the first 3 months of 2026, the mental weight will become a physical anchor.
He is a rider who thrives on joy and the show, but there is no joy in finishing 15th. We have to wonder, if the dream becomes a nightmare, will Toprak have the resilience to stay, or will he retreat back to the comfort of WSBK with his tail between his legs? The psychological breaking point of a champion is often invisible until it is too late. Is the 2026 season the beginning of a new legend, or the final chapter of a tragic crossover? As we conclude this special report, the consensus from the Italian Paddock insiders is nearly unanimous. Toprak Razgatlioglu is facing the most dangerous crossroads of his life. He is a talent that comes along once every 20 years, but he is stepping into a firestorm. The verdict isn't about his skill, it's about the timing, the machinery, and the overwhelming level of the competition. Sanchini and Pasini aren't being haters, they are being realists. they have seen many stars burn out in the transition from production bikes to prototypes. To succeed, Toprak must effectively kill the rider he was in WSBK and be reborn as a MotoGP specialist. He must trade his stunts for stability, his aggression for efficiency, and his pride for patience. If he can do that, he might become the first true WSBK crossover king since the early 2000s. But if he remains the mad dog who thinks he can flip the paddock upside down with sheer will, the 2026 season will be remembered as the year a Turkish star was extinguished by the cold, hard reality of Grand Prix racing. The world is watching, the clock is ticking, and for Toprak Razgatlioglu, the margin for error has officially vanished. The lights are about to go out, and for Toprak, it is either greatness or total obscurity.